Welcome to my show. We're going to go up to a bulletin board and we're going to look at some pictures and get in the mood for our project today. As you can see on our bulletin board reference, we have a lot of scenes of Florida areas in the Everglades and out in the far barren lands out there with grasses and palm trees. Let's come down to the palette and let's make a decision on what we're going to paint and where we're going to paint it today. I'm going to wet a little fan brush and go with just a little touch of, a green or a brown, it really doesn't matter the color, and make a decision up on our canvas of where things are going to be located. First of all, we're going to have a low horizon line. That is usually best in a scene of this nature. A little clump of trees are going to be over in here. Then we're going to have another clump of trees, and this is all going to be very dark in here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little notation with just some paint that's going to be dark trees. From here down, it's going to be water reflecting from that dark. And then this is all water, maybe little grasses over here, little distant trees. And all I've done is put a little bit of an indication where some of the items are going to go. That's kind of a preliminary sketch, and a very rough one at that, but that's all you need to start getting an idea of your positioning. What's important is I have a low horizon line, and that will help create the vastness of the Everglades and give us a lot of interesting sky. So we'll begin. We'll put the fan brush aside and pick up a 1-inch foliage brush and start working on our sky colors. I'll start with the natural bristle brush, and this is oils I'm working in. And I'll load up the 1-inch brush with a little bit of ochre. And I've already put a little bit in there, but I'm going to add a little more yellow ochre and a little smidgen of orange, so I get kind of a warm cream color. And this will start being a little underpainting for the clouds. Because I want my sky to be very powerful and dramatic, I'm going to stir or roll the brush around. And I make this a little rich so that you can see the coloring, and it makes a more powerful painting also. One of these great big cumulus clouds in the background. And this is going to be a little bit of light in it. After I get that in there, I want a little bit of that in the water reflecting to create a nice glow on the water. So let's come back down, and in this area, I'll bring a little vertical stroke. And you notice in the sky I was swirling, and the water it's kind of vertically pulled down type of effect. And that will start using a little bit of reflection of that. Back down to the palette, more white. I think we're going to use a little bit of orange and maybe a touch of alizarin. We don't want to get too pink on this, but we do want a pretty color tone. So we'll get a little blushy with the pink. Whoops, that's almost too much, so we'll put a little blue in it, and that'll dull it a little bit. And let's go, and on the left side, I'm going to bring a little more color interest, kind of skimming and stirring around the edges. And as I do that, they soften and blend together, so I don't want to leave any hard stroke marks. And I'll bring a little bit of that also streaked into the water vertically. And we will continue. All I'm doing is blocking in color interest, and I use the white to make the paint go on easily. Color can be a little Prussian blue or a light blue or cerulean, just about any color blue that you want. Add it into the same color mixing so that it will gray automatically because of the yellows and the reds that are in there. So I've got now a nice kind of dull tone, and I'm going to start down in here, and you can see that grays. It's not a strong blue because I left the other colors in my brush. And again, swirling, pushing. You've got to grab hold of your canvas if you're going to use a lot of pressure and begin to put this around in that area. And this is making me kind of an odd-shaped cumulus cloud. Once my brush gets kind of dry, I ease my pressure and tickle and swirl and soften. So there's just a real strong impact of a strong glow. I'm going to repeat that in the water. Each color I put in the sky I want to put down in the water so I get a nice effect. I'm going to start just underneath the back line of the distance, and I let this kind of streak down again vertically and hang down, but don't come all the way to the bottom. I'm going to leave that glow in the water, and it should look a little bit like hair. As you brush it, it should streak hairily as it's hanging down. Let's come on over behind some grasses. The grasses are going to be here. We'll backdrop them with some gray. And as soon as I use up the paint in my brush, I can soften, and that gives a nice color tone. Look at those lovely colors in there. If I want a little cloud, I can push a little harder and swirl and puff. Try to keep loose when you're doing this. Okay, we're going to finish blocking in the sky. I'm going to use a little bit more of the soft white. I'm going to start bringing in more of a blue-violet, a little alizarin, but then a little Prussian. Whoops, I bet that's too much Prussian. A little bit of Prussian. And start making kind of a purple tone. going to be a really nice color. And yeah, that's lovely. Okay, a little bit of swirl. We'll come on back here behind the trees. I'm not going to use a lot of this, but I do want a little extra accent of this color in. So I can hide back behind the trees with the clouds. And again, as I push, I get more paint out of the brush. And as I ease my pressure, it melts into the edge of the last color. And we're going to maybe have time to do some palette knife work on this and even make a more powerful sky out of it. Let's go into the blues now, again, with the white. In the mixing spot, I'm mixing up a little extra paint so that I can go in the water and finish blocking that in. And this is more the blue sky color, but I don't want it to be too vivid. So I'm using a little alizarin. You've probably noticed that I don't clean my brush a lot as I go ahead and build the colors in it. It's because it kind of helps gray and makes a natural transition with my colors, rather than make the colors a little too strong and vivid. Ooh, that's a nice kind of a blue-gray, steely color. Notice how I'm tickling off the end of my brush. This way I don't get a hard, straight edge around the cloud. If I kind of break down into it, it gives me a little bit of a fluff and puff around the edges. And we just want to get the sky blocked in. Now you can see that cloud beginning to pop out of there. And notice how every once in a while I'll take kind of a little bite out of the cloud. I'll come in there. That'll give it an odd shape. And this now has nice interest over here. We'll go ahead and when I push harder on the brush, see how the lighter values come out up here on the right? That's just attractive and it makes for a nice complement. And it brings a little of this color back into there. So I like working with my brushes this way. I kind of plan it that way. Makes it easier in the time frame that I have, not having to clean my brush a lot. But if I get to grab a color and I'm not happy with a color, then I'll clean the brush, and not before. Okay, as soon as I get the sky pretty well covered with my colors and a little bit of an interest to the shape of the clouds, I'll make sure that all sky section is blocked in. A little bit of a nick of paint on there. Then I'll come down to the water area, again connecting this color down in and most of the water area until the water is completely surrounded. See how I leave little bits of the other color showing. Now I don't want to go too much in here because I want dark reflections from the trees. So I'll just go on the lower edge of the canvas and kind of pull up so that I can leave room for my darks to go back into there. That's nice. We need a little bit of this behind the trees. Okay, I want to just get this behind the tree edge, and then I want to stop back and see how I've done on my sky and my water. Well, I think the sky and the water are pretty well blocked in, except for the dark shadows here. Let's go back into the distance right here. And this brush is a little bit too large, so I'm going to set it down for just a minute. And I'm going to pick up a smaller fan brush for the smaller area. Using the same sky color that I last had on the big brush, I'm going to add a touch of green, maybe even phthalo green rather than the sap green. Just wanted to start introducing a little color so I can get some color perspective in the distant trees. And let's come up here just above my back horizon line, block it in, and I'm pushing and kind of poking with the brush to make a little tree line way in the distance back there. Something kind of nice and soft. You can keep this very small, but I'm going to give it a little bit of a tree line back there. Pull down so it reflects slightly. You don't want to pull down too much because if it's really far away, you wouldn't see the reflection that distant. So we'll just soften it away so we have a nice subtle impression back there. Very soft, very light. Maybe a touch darker at the base of that. I'll add just a touch more brown and green, a shade darker, so that underneath the base of the trees, right in there, kind of darken that a little bit. Put a little dark, wipe the brush, kind of poke with the corner of the brush so it stays kind of bushy or fuzzy. Kind of intermingle it up into the other colors, gives you a little more depth and dimension. A little bit of a pull down, a reflection, dusting the brush on a paper towel, and soften. Oh, that's nice. Maybe even a little water line way in the distance. Maybe there's a little shine on the water. We'll put a little white with my blue and the edge of a painting knife and find just a little bit of a glint. I don't want too straight of a horizon line there. Sometimes I slide the knife, sometimes I just kind of touch and lift. And if I get too much, I just kind of tickle it out a little bit so that it's a very distant illusion. Okay, now we're ready for the big, powerful contrast in this. I'm going to go back to the 1-inch foliage brush. That works for me really quickly. I'm going to go with some sap green, and I'm even going to darken it with a little burnt umber so it's a real brownish green. Or if I want it even darker, I'll put burnt umber with some Prussian blue, and that'll have the tendency to be a greenish cast. Now this is almost like a deep forest green. Beautiful, rich, rich, dark color. Now we'll come up to the tree area and we're going to start kind of pushing and poking. Now I'm kind of stabbing at the canvas, allowing the bristles to kind of bend over and give me kind of a fuzzy little blotch so that I get a little leafy impression and kind of give me a nice, subtle illusion of, oh, it's kind of like stippling, but not really. Give myself a nice tree area. Come all the way down and stop right about in there. And I'm just doing the upper edge right now. Reload the brush and come to the other side where I'm going to have another grouping of trees and bushes. And the 1-inch brush does this very nicely for a block-in. I think I'm going to be switching to a smaller brush or a mop brush to do it more detailed, but for now, this brush does the job. As I go into the shadows of the trees or down into the deep section, I'm going to use more blue and burnt umber so that's even darker. And I'm really loading the same brush up. Now you can see on the brush there's still a little of my old sky colors in there, but I wiped a fair amount of that out. And if it won't get dark, you need to wipe your brush. Not always necessary to clean it. All right, let's just rub that on there. Get that blocked in. That's because I'm pushing very hard on the brush, and that's kind of making my canvas shake. So I use my hand up here and kind of balance it and hold it in place. But you do need to apply a firm, firm pressure to the canvas so that you can push that paint out, because I have more paint to put on top of it. Now as I start pulling down into the water, you can see how it begins to mix and soften, and that streaks beautifully into the reflections of the water. Let's just go ahead and block it in. I'm running out of paint, so I need more. To the palette. Burnt umber is a beautiful warm tone. You want to keep the reds. If you run out of burnt umber, try a little orange or alizarin in your greens to keep them a little on the brown side. It's a little dry sometimes, and you want that earthy look sometimes with your colors. So we're just blocking in the tree area and then the reflections of the trees. And notice when I hit the wet paint down here on the lower right that I'm getting a little bit of that mixing, and I pick up the purple, and when I come back up I get streaks in there, and it makes nice little highlight areas that kind of streak into your trees. Very attractive on that area, so don't be too worried if you pick up color occasionally. I'm going to come over to the other side, same thing, dark color, and reflect down underneath these. Ooh, that makes for a nice strong contrast, and look how that sky seems to get lighter as we work these darks up against it. Okay, while I'm down here in the left corner, I'm going to turn my brush another angle, and I'm going to press, this time letting the hairs go under the brush, and block in the little bit of a foliage for the foreground little island of grass. And that gives me kind of a weedy effect in there. It's really kind of nice. You can even turn it on its side and make taller detail grasses. Well, that's pretty good for block in. So what I want to do is just a little bit of light on that, and I'm going to use a little bit of ochre and a lighter green, and on a mop brush I'm going to come up here and soften just a little bit with a little sunlight, and I'm stippling. I'm just jumping up and down with a little bit of a tiptoe, and maybe you'll see it down here a little bit more. See the lights? I'm accenting a few little trees up into the depth of the darks, and we'll even bring some other colors, and we'll do a little bit over here. That just gives me my final block in for the backdrop trees, maybe a little in the water. See how you just sweep it? Okay, and a little bit of shimmer on that. Ooh, doesn't that look nice and glassy? Maybe a little tiny little grassy area catches light right there. Okay, let's step back one more time and see how we're doing with this stage. Oh, I like what we're beginning to proceed with right now. I think I'm going to use this brush for just a minute and dust it off a little bit. And just before I get too much paint on the brush, I'm going to do a little ripple in the water over here under this grouping of trees. A little bit out here on the edge. Now if you sweep from the darks out into the water, you're not likely to touch the brush down and get a little daub of dark green there. So just kind of pull it gently and put these little streaky lines across there, and it gives a little movement for the surface of the water. Very, very nice way to do your water. And a mop brush is a soft brush. I think I'm going to show you another little fun thing to do. If you take a knife, and let's come down to the palette for a minute. My brush has all these dark greens in it at this stage, but I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and I'm going to tickle a little bit on the side of the brush. Can you see how I'm just kind of tapping that on there? Maybe even a little bit more of a yellow-green close to the ends. Now that means on the tip edge of my brush, I still have this dark right on the points of the hairs. Now let's come up to the canvas and let's see if we can get a nice impact area right in here by putting a little extra bright clump of grass by leaning up to that light yellow. Well, it didn't show up as well as I wanted it there. Let's come over here and see if I can get a little bit of a weedy grass area right there close to the water line. Yeah, that worked pretty nice. And now while I've got this color, I'm going to just put a little subtle area back here in the trees. Just softening as I go, kind of stippling, tiptoeing on the top edge of the brush so I get these little leafy dibble dabbles. This is a mop brush. Oh, it's wonderful for these little suggestions of leaves. The more little touches I make, the more suggestions of foliage and things in the shadows. You may not see that well, but it sure does look good when you get up close to it. I'm going to use a little bit of blue into this. Again, keep the dark on the tip edge of the brush so that when you come up to the canvas and you touch dark, you're touching dark on dark. But when you kind of poke, you can lean up to the blue that's on the top of the brush and give you another little subtle feeling of color. Here's a few streaks down in the shadows and a few ripples sweeping across it. Oh, I like that. Okay, I'm going to go back now with I think a flat at this stage. Well, let's keep it small. I'll go to even a smaller brush, a liner. I'm going to take a little burnt umber and just work it dry onto the brush, no thinner in this. And I think I'm going to use just a little touch of ochre on its point. See if we can come over and give us a foundation and maybe put in a couple of palm trees since we're in Florida. I'm going to tilt the handle up towards the top of the canvas and just kind of drag that. And as I come past the trees, you'll find that you can see the little bit of the dark on there. Down here you see the ochre, but there is more umber in this brush than there is the dark. We'll put a few palms over here, and if we want a little suggestion of the ripple, we'll kind of reflect those just a little bit in the water. Then we'll come over here and do a couple there. Now remember, for all of these little sticks you put in palm trunks, you got to put a palm tree on top. And to do that, there's a couple of ways to do it. I think I'll use a fan brush because it's about the quickest way I can do it. So I'm going to use a bristle fan, some dark green on one corner, maybe a little brown. I like that earthy brown in my foliage colors, and a little lighter green, like a yellow green, which could be sap green and ochre on the other corner. Let's come up to the canvas and see what we have on the brush. This corner has got a light green, and that has a very dark color on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the dark right at the top of the stick or the trunk and let the light lean out towards the edges and just suggest with one quick little sweep, a little bit of a spider in the sky. That's what my assistant Becky always calls them, little spiders in the sky. But it's like a little pom-pom or palm frond area. Whoops, now here I put the light to the center. You want the dark to touch in at the trunk and put a couple of little palms silhouetted right up over in there. A little dark in there. There we go. And we'll come over to the other side and see if we can put, just remember, touch a little dot. See that little blotch? There's going to be a palm tree, there's a tree, and there's, oops, 1, 2, 3, same height, let's stagger them. So I'll have to bring that tree trunk on up. There's going to be that one. Keep the dark to the inside. Always make sure the dark corner is over the palm trunk. I'm running out of paint, so, oops, I keep putting the light to the inside. Well, I guess that one has sunlight on it. Let's reload. Dark brown with a little green in it. Light green on the other corner, and see if I can do a little better job of these. There, that's better. Now that's got my sunlight out there on the end. There, I like that much better. Okay, we're not going to do too much of the reflections of those, maybe a little hint here and there. Let's come down to the left corner and let's see how we can use this brush while it still has a lower dark corner and a top light corner. Turn it on its edge and push in a few little spidery weeds or bushes or all sorts of things grow out there in the swamp, and we'll just put some other little things into the composition by using this brush. Now if you've got a lot of time, spend some time with detail. Go back to your liner. You could spend hours playing with the little interesting things in here. I think with the liner, I'll use, a light green. Let's use a little bit of ochre and sap together, not too much paint. And we'll come in and in the foreground, bring a few little wild grasses. And if you get too tight on this and you line them up like fence posts, it's not too pretty. So I just kind of skim the point, and sometimes I just go up and down. I get these little seed pod things and, garbagey grasses in the swamps. So when I come up and stop, I get a little seed pod or something up on the top of that. Something's growing up there. And I think we need a little trunk. I've got one of these palm trees is kind of levitating on me without being connected. So we'll just kind of pull a little extra shadow where the trunk goes up into the palm tree. Okay, we need a little water line under those bushes. That would help. I don't want to use pure white, so I'm going to use my palette knife and come down over here in the corner of my mixing spot and mix just enough white so that I get an off-white. You can see that doesn't have a pure white look to it, so it can be lavender or it can be greenish. Take a little bit on the edge. I just kind of tap the edge of the knife, and this is a painting knife, onto the edge. And let's come up here where the water line would be kind of right up near the shore. And if you just go straight in and just kind of touch it, make sure you don't tilt it up or down so that it's crooked and the horizon line or the water lines have a funny look to them. And put a little glint or glimmer. And you don't want to go straight all the way across. You don't want to overstate it. Let's put a little movement of lights on the water. Sometimes I put lily pads. Sometimes I do kind of like a pond scum look where there's a lot of growth and things growing onto the, that's too much. I put some on, then I take some off because I don't want to overstate the illusion and get too busy. Gee, I kind of like that. Well, this painting really wouldn't be complete without a few little distant egrets in it. I love painting egrets. I hope to do one of those on one of my animal series in the future. And I think I'm going to use a little bit of thinner in the paint, stick to a little bit of lavender. And these are going to be so far away, I don't have to worry about the detail on them. But one day I'll paint one really detailed for you. Let's get a deep, rich purple down here on the palette. Maybe a touch of white tickled into it. And all they really are is a little suggestion of a dot and a dash because their heads are so small, and you got to think of how much perspective you have here. We're just going to make a little tiny dot for the head and a little dash. We'll put a couple down by the water and then a little reflection. And really when they're nestled up in the trees, sometimes they tuck their heads under and you really don't know what they are across there, but they're just a whole flock of them up there in the trees. So often out there in the Everglades, and the vertical pull down into the water is a reflection, just almost like a light glow would be in there. Now they're so far away you wouldn't see the beaks on them, so it would be too much. If you get one that you're not happy with or gets too large, take the handle and just kind of rub him a little bit or tap him and he'll pretty well go away. So he's pretty adjustable in that stage. I'm going to just soften this trunk line here. I think it's a little too strong. And use that same lavender color for the shadowed egrets. Put a few little other sticks and twigs so there's a little more interest into the foliage. Oh, if I spent about another half hour on this, I'd have it just so detailed, but I really don't want to overdo it. So let's see where we can go from here. Let's go up and try up on the sky and wipe the knife and put a little more impact of light up in the cloud, like that little last kiss of sunlight. Kind of white with a little cream color in it. And we're going to use a knife. On the bottom of the knife, I'm going to kind of iron with the bottom of the knife and press in a little light up in the sky. This is titanium. I think it'll give a little more power up into the edges, and it's just kind of like I'm ironing in little bits of paint. Now you could blend that, but I don't think you'll need to. I'd love to see you try this one, and let me know your results. Just write me and let me know. Thanks for joining me.